Has China launched a war on Taiwan? It's a question we've asked before on the show. This time, the answer has come from Taiwan. They say China is at war with them, a war to dent their resolve. You may have heard of the famous Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu. He said the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy, to break his resistance without fighting. And that's what China is trying to do with Taiwan. Break it psychologically before striking it militarily. The Taiwanese have a term for it. They're calling it China's grey zone warfare. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll tell you all about it, starting with the latest round of provocations. On Tuesday, the PLA conducted a patrol near the Taiwan Strait, a joint combat readiness patrol aimed at Taiwan. This is the first. All three branches of the Chinese military were involved. The PLA's Eastern Command was in charge of this. But guess what China is saying now? It is blaming Taiwan for these military tensions.
The Chinese People's Liberation Army are carrying out drills for the purpose of defending the state's sovereignty and territorial integrity and targeting at the separatist activities carried out by the Taiwan Independence Forces and interference by external forces. Fundamentally speaking, it is for the purpose of safeguarding the interests of the entire Chinese nation and the immediate interests of the compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait. The tension of the Taiwan Strait is hard to ease if the Taiwan Independence Forces do not stop provocations.
So this is about Taiwan's resolve to stay independent. Of course, China would have a problem with that. Plus, they have the US to contend with, and that's making them jittery. You see, the Americans are stepping up support to Taiwan. Biden's statements have rattled China. And now a delegation of US lawmakers visited Taiwan. This happened on Tuesday. No names have been revealed. Neither has the itinerary been shared. The Americans came on a military plane. They stayed at the airport briefly, then left for Okinawa in Japan. Clearly, both the US and Taiwan wanted to keep this visit under wraps, but the Chinese noticed what happened and responded with a military patrol. Taiwan says this is part of a bigger design, what they call China's grey zone warfare. It's basically a campaign of unconventional warfare, a campaign designed to weaken Taiwan before an actual military offensive begins. At the center of this plan are incursions. And the idea is very simple, really. China wants to exhaust Taiwan's combat power. To do that, the PLA is repeatedly violating the Taiwanese airspace. Consider these numbers. Last month, Chinese fighters carried out 148 intrusions, 148 in a month. Do you know how many times the PLA violated Taiwan's airspace this year? About 700 times, according to one estimate, 700 incursions. What does Beijing achieve with these incursions? They allow the Chinese military to scout for vulnerabilities. They send a message to America, a signal that the jets from the PLA can reach Taiwan anytime. And of course, they exhaust the air force of Taiwan. Every time a Chinese military plane intrudes Taiwan's airspace, Taipei loses money. It spends more on aircraft maintenance. It needs more resources to respond to new threats. Last year, Taiwan used up more than 8% of its military budget just to respond to Chinese threats. And this year, it's worse. The PLA has escalated the conflict. It has increased the number of incursions. China knows that Taiwan has limited resources. So it wants to bleed them dry. And this is just one part of the strategy. China's grey zone warfare is not a campaign that is limited to military incursions. It has three more components. Number one is cyber warfare. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has put out some numbers. They say cyber attacks on Taiwan have increased by 40 times since 2018, 40. They blame the Chinese for this. In 2020, Taiwan was defending itself against around 2,100 cyber attacks every day, 2,100 attacks daily. Component number two is propaganda. China is running a disinformation campaign against Taiwan. It is spreading fake news through social media. And these posts often go viral thanks to China's disinformation networks. It is believed that China has hired locals from Taiwan. Why locals? To add more authenticity to its fake news. Local Taiwanese can get more than $1,000 every month to produce social media content for China. And the third and the final component is international isolation. We already know how this works. China blocks Taiwan at the United Nations, at the World Health Organization. It has also begun sanctioning Taiwanese leaders. 3 top leaders were recently banned from entering the mainland. So military incursions, cyber warfare, propaganda campaigns, and international isolation. Short of launching a direct military conflict, Beijing is doing everything it can to take over Taiwan. This is China's strategy of grey zone warfare. But what's the end game? How will a military offensive unfold? How will China attack Taiwan if the islands are on the back foot? Experts say Xi Jinping has 3 options now. Option number 1 is to seize islands that are close to Taiwan, then launch a military offensive from there. Option number 2 is blockades, cut off Taiwan's air and sea lines, choke the flow of supplies to the Taiwanese military and the people. Option number 3 is an all-out invasion. These are the 3 options. Which one is Xi Jinping expected to choose? Some Taiwanese military experts say the Chinese president could go for option 1, seize islands close to Taiwan. In fact, they have identified a vulnerability too, the Pratas Islands. This is what they look like. These islands are controlled by Taiwan. They are vulnerable to a Chinese attack. These islands are more than 400 kilometers away from Taiwan, so defending them is going to be a challenge for Taipei. But for China, these islands are easily accessible from Hong Kong, about 320 kilometers away. Taking these islands will give China a clear advantage. Pratas Islands can serve as a base for the People's Liberation Army. They can be turned into a launching ground for future attacks on Taiwan. From here, the PLA can also keep an eye on American warships, monitor their activities in the South China Sea. And these scenarios can no more be dismissed as hypothetical. The threat to Taiwan is clear and present. The new tactics signal a shift in Beijing's approach. It wants to weaken Taiwan before it moves to take it. And this is a threat not just for Taiwan. It's a threat for all democracies. China may begin with Taiwan, but not end with it. Today it's Taiwan, tomorrow it could be anyone. With military incursions, with propaganda, with economic coercion, China is working on a model to weaken democratic states. The world will have to come together to thwart China's designs in Taiwan. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.